Konnichiwa, and welcome to the Samurai Way, the podcast where we dive into the wisdom of the samurai, the art of Japanese living, and the philosophies that help us live with purpose and perseverance. I'm Lori Tsugawa, and whether you're here to explore Bushido, the samurai, uncover the meaning of Ikigai, or just looking for a little extra gambaru, never give up spirit in your daily life, you're in the right place. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's walk this path together. Are you ready? Let's begin. Well, konnichiwa, minasan. I'm Lori Tsugawa, and I'm so happy and thankful you are here joining us with the Samurai Way podcast, where we delve and dive into the ways of the samurai and Japanese principles of Code of Bushido, Ikigai, Gambaru, sometimes Kaizen, and Kintsugi. So you never know what you're going to have here, but it's always a surprise. It's always wonderful. And I'm so blessed to be the host of this and meet these wonderful people. And today I have with me Laura Elliott, and I'm going to read you a short bio. Is a USA Today Kirkus-starred and Wall Street Journal bestselling ghostwriter of award-winning books in business, leadership, biography, memoir, and historical fiction. An award-winning screenwriter and former E! Entertainment and Los Angeles Times journalist, she brings a cinematic style to true survival, crime, war, and human journey stories. Her work spans feature films, documentaries, limited series, travel, lifestyle, journalism for outlets like the Los Angeles Times, World Travel Magazine, and LA Parrot. A member of the International Screenwriters Association and the Association of Ghostwriters, Laura continues to chase truth and story wherever they lead. So her memoir, Dear Laura, a lost chapter of World War II, a father-daughter adventure in courage, faith, and freedom, is now available. So you will learn more about her at laurasmagicday.com. So we have with us, and welcome to this show, Laura.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for your kind invitation to be here.
Well, your story is fascinating, and it's only just beginning, and your book is out now. So why don't you just give us a brief introduction of where you came from to your book now?
Yeah, so it's been a journey. It's been a 38-year journey. The story started out at my daughter's first birthday party. She's now 39 years old with kids of her own. And she was just learning to walk. And, my father and I, we've had just a father-daughter relationship, like regular father-daughter relationship. I always knew he was a POW in Japan, but it never really came up. It wasn't like a big deal or anything at any time. It was just something that was out there. And one of the things my dad did, he had many things that he did that had backstories that I couldn't even imagine. And one of them was he made these wooden benches. He made them with me, my brothers, and my sister, and later my children and my, their nieces and nephews and cousins. And so this is the bench that he would always make with us. And it was just, oh, Dad just makes these benches. Like, I never really thought much about it, And so he had just been down to make this bench with my oldest daughter, like months before her first birthday. And she was just learning to walk, and she was steadying herself on this bench. My parents weren't at the party because they lived in Chicago and I lived in LA at the time. But my brother lived close by, so he was at the party. And when my daughter steadied herself on the bench, he just pointed to the bench and whispered, "Concentration camp bench," to me. And I was like shocked. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, why would you say something like this to me at Candy's birthday party? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, ask Dad. And so that would begin a decades long sort of odyssey, adventure, really. It really is adventure in Courage, Faith, and Freedom, where we exchanged letters and we went on visits together. I would see him and we would talk, and we had these letters. And then as I visited him, more information would come along. He would give me letters from the grandmother I never knew that were actually written in German. So I couldn't even read them until I had them translated. But he was captured in Indonesia. My family, he was born in Indonesia. I would learn why, why there, how'd you guys end up in Indonesia? And it was really just by happenstance. My grandmother was pregnant and she was from missionary families, and they were serving in the Celebes for generations. So one of my great grandfather started a church on one island, and my great grandfather started a church on another island, Ulusiao, which is in the Celebes. And so they were sailing to be with them when the baby would be born. They all wanted to be with their family. So they were on the boat. They left out of, I believe it was Rotterdam. And the captain of the boat, when they got to Jakarta, said, "You got to get off the boat. We can't have you on this boat anymore. You are, you're pregnant, and we don't have a doctor, and I don't want to take responsibility." So they just kicked him off the boat in Jakarta, where they knew no one. So it's the story about how they bloomed where they were planted, essentially. And it was it's a harrowing tale, really, that part of the story. So there was a lot of backstory to understand, and a culture to understand, no way of understanding. And so I would travel a couple of times around the world to get the answers I needed to find out the mystery, because it was turned into, I thought it would be just a story about my dad's POW experience. And we were just going to help Dad, understand it and process it. But it ended up being a much larger story, where our family was actually taken hostage to force the scientist grandfather and other scientists to work for the Japanese military on a top secret project in their nuclear program. So they were essentially, my dad was a prisoner in 4 different prison camps in Indonesia, and then they were taken by hell ship to Japan, where they were in 2 different prisons there. So they experienced the firebombing of Tokyo. They experienced, of course, they weren't at Hiroshima or Nagasaki, but they were in Nagoya at the time. So, this idea of, we live now in a society where you can get every answer to every question on your phone, right? These people have been taken out of where they knew into different cultures, didn't know where they were hearing names, they don't know where they are, no atlases, no maps. So just everything, trying to put all the puzzle pieces together all the time, trying to get information was really part of the thing, that they tried to do while they were, being held captive, and making sense of sort of what was going on, trying it as best they could.
Well, in our earlier conversation before this show, we were talking about how food was a connection, and how your father was very, what would be the word, innovative, resourceful, and food was always a connection for him. Would you like to share with our audience about that?
Yeah, well, my dad, I knew my dad before this whole journey. My dad had to go to the best restaurant. He had to have the best table. We were always really impeccably dressed for holidays. Even in our own home, it was top, silver, crystal, china. Everything was really fancy. He loved food. My dad had a Jimmy Carter smile. Seriously, he looked a little bit like Jimmy Carter. He loved food, especially chocolate. I mean, he was just like, and it was just that thing about dad. I'm just like, oh, okay, dad really loves food. Dad's like, we would go to the Ritz in Chicago for Christmas Day. Of course, it was at home on Christmas Eve. Mom would cook the big meal. We would all dress up. It would be great. On Christmas Day, we all went down to the Ritz in Chicago, and there was just this opulent feast. Like he just made, we were just eating all kinds of seafood. And so he would even so I didn't know why. And, but he was starved. I mean, my family was rescued off a beach in Hamamatsu, Japan. My dad was 80 pounds and 6'3". So
Emaciated.
yeah. So and he just, food was everything. And when I was talking to him about his experience, as we grew older and grew closer, and he was more vulnerable and able to share some things with me, he said, well, when you're starving, food's all you think about. So he was in a prison for 2 years before his family knew where he was. They had taken him prisoner first. And he kind of felt like, oh, he was taken prisoner when he was 18. And so he was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to see my parents. I'm not going to have the life before. So he's like, I just have to make this now my life. And so he got a job in the kitchen. And in the kitchen, it was great because you could scrape the barrels where they boiled the sago, which was what the food was for the prisoners. And he could scrape the sides with his fingers and get just that much more protein. And then he also was in charge of keeping the fires going with the firewood. And so what he would do is use the axe to chop up the firewood and make these little benches. And the reason he did that was because the torture was there was no place to sit. And so there was some sort of prison economy, and I write about it in the book, about how he was able to barter these benches for things to survive in the camp. And he would take the nails out of the bamboo fences and steal them. So if he was caught, it was a severe penalty. So he had to do it really stealthily. And that's how he would, nail the planks together. Now these are nails, but this was essentially the prototype was the first bench. It's essentially how he made it. And so, yeah, so food was a big thing for him. And then as he was moved by the Japanese to Tokyo, they were taken to a Chilean embassy that was there, was bombed in the firebombing. So it's no longer there anymore. But before, when they were staying there was a chef in the kitchen, and my dad was always very curious. And so he'd hang out with the chef to find out about the food. And the chef had buried a toilet in the dirt. And he used all the old fish scraps and poured them in that toilet with some water to make fertilizer so they could grow tomato plants better. Mm-hmm. And so he showed dad how to fertilize the plants. So dad survived in Indonesia by growing his own food, his own garden, essentially. And these are herbs to heal people. And so instead of getting caught in his own victimization, he was always trying to be helpful, staying very curious, wanting to know things, and trying to survive. And that's the inspiration that I take from dad.
Well, we both love a book by, it was written about 100 years ago by Inazo Nitobe, The Soul of Bushido, The Soul of Japan. Do you want to, I'd like you to expound on that and share how it helped you in shaping your book.
Yeah, so I came to it relatively late in my process, actually, very end of writing the book. My first experience with knowing Bushido was through my dad. He described the clash of civilizations that was occurring. when he was taken prisoner. So he basically was saying, basically that the way of the warrior is the ancient way. And it was like death before defeat was sort of part of that world. And so in the eyes of the Japanese, the prisoners were seen as less than human because they were allowed to be captured. So they were in a clash of civilizations. And my dad understood this intellectually to a great deal. So he never faulted the people, the culture, the situation. And I think that's the message of the book is there's so many, we think things are black and white. A lot of us can, we hear World War II, we think we know the story. We think we know this person, that person, good and bad, but there's good people and bad people. There's, it's in all of us. So my dad chose to always see the good no matter what. And so the idea of Bushido came up with Dad when he was talking about being in Japan. And he said that there were 7 virtues and, honor, duty, courage, benevolence, morality, truthfulness, loyalty. And I think the ones that speak to me the most in Dad's life are about this idea of morality. He really was all about loving thy neighbor. He always has been. We've been, obviously, we've been from families of missionaries for generations. But, behavior sometimes doesn't always match what you might believe. I don't know. But he never said a bad word about a Japanese person. As a matter of fact, he encouraged, when he was working later as a hydroelectric engineer in like 1951, so that's like 6 years after he got rescued off the beach in Hamamatsu. So this is not very long after the war. The president of his engineering company, Harza Engineering, asked him, he said, Hans, I heard you spent some time in Japan. Why don't you give these Japanese engineers a tour of the city in Chicago? And my dad said, yes, I would love to. So he developed an itinerary, which is another thing my dad was really crazy about. He had itineraries for trips planned down to the minute. Like he did not want to waste a minute, which is like so important because of all the time he was a prisoner for 3.5 years from the age of 18 to like almost 22. So those lost years, right? Those are years when you're just finding yourself. Those are years when you're being you're just coming into yourself. He never wanted to waste another minute. So I wonder what those poor Japanese people do with my dad. But anyway, so there was all this architecture in Chicago, and he loved architecture. He just loved it. He loved being with people. He loved telling stories. So he showed him around town. The Japanese were very happy. He knew all of the language and the customs and the food. He was able to help them be in the city and feel comfortable and really, just to have a good time. And the president afterwards, it was a great trip. And afterward, the president of the company came up to my dad and said, Hans, I did not know you were a prisoner of war in Japan. If I knew that, I never would have asked you to take these engineers through the city. And my dad said it was my absolute pleasure. And that's just, he showed me, I mean, there's a way of forgiveness that is just beautiful. And that's kind of about this morality idea, is about, we forgive, right? Love thy neighbor means, that when things go wrong, you forgive. And so that was, and I was trying to work on forgiveness in my life when I was trying to write the story. So it was a beautiful example for me.
Oh, yes.
And because of what had happened in my personal life, which I also write about in the book. But then courage, the tenet of courage. Courage looks like so many things. A regular person getting caught up in extraordinary circumstances is definitely courage. But courage is a way of thinking. And I think my dad, even though he was from a different culture, had the Bushido way in him, and maybe not from the warrior standpoint, but these tenets were very important to him. And I think he had a courageous way of thinking that was coming through curiosity.
Mhm.
Curiosity, all the time when he was a boy, he saw the katakana characters, the Chinese characters in the shops in Bandung where he grew up, and he wanted his mom to teach him. He wanted to get lessons. He wanted to learn how to draw those characters, and because of that curiosity, later he would need to know those characters, and he was already had a base of knowledge. And then Japanese soldiers knew that he knew a little bit, and so he was interesting to them, and so he would learn more. And the families were taken by hell ship from Indonesia to Tokyo. And on board that ship there was a lot of time, and so some of a soldier was nice to him and helped him work on his Japanese a little bit. So there was just all this curiosity was the cure to overwhelm, and I think it is, right? So for my dad, it's just been this beautiful experience of seeing him go from one thing to another, not ever taking it all in a crushing way, in a way of being very discouraged. He wanted to, because that's not from God. Courage is from God. And so
Mhm.
he chose to take the courageous route. And I just love to know that story, and that I wrote it as best I could. He really wanted his story told. And it's a promise I made to him, and I only fulfilled
Mhm.
it on August 15th, as a few weeks ago, on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, which is when the
Oh.
family was liberated,
Mhm.
yeah, from World War II. And then I guess the last tenet of truthfulness is the other thing that I was wanting to share, because
Yes.
um, truth matters.
And especially
And
in Japan.
yeah,
Mhm.
truth matters. And his story matters, the truth of what happened, um and not looking the other way. I think, it's interesting. I asked Dad one time, I said, because I, not knowing or having been through this experience, only reading about it until I talked to him, when the Japanese occupied, I thought, things just stopped immediately, and things were immediately bad. And he said, well, he said, yeah, so it's like freedom is like a salami, he said. And what happens is people slice little pieces of it, just little pieces. And before you know it, you don't have it.
It's gone. Mhm.
It's gone. And so that message, I think, really resonates in the modern world today,
Mhm.
that, not to take our freedom for granted, and to
Right.
be aware. Yeah. When those,
I look at what, I think of World War II in a different way, because we were Japanese, and my parents and grandparents were all put behind bars, barbed wire fence, and lived a horrible existence. But they did not, most of them chose not to be bitter, that they were going to make the best of it. They made the places that they lived great farmland, and they made the best for their children and tried to make it as normal as possible living in those kind of situations. So they really just had that spirit with them, the gambaru, never give up, just to make the best of what you have. And so I think that's what life is about, is just making the best of what you have.
yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I also think that what I was really surprised when I did the research to find out was they just thought they were going to die. So
Mm,
they decided to take all kinds of risks. Um, they were radio scientists, and they weren't supposed to have radios. And in the end, they did create a radio that could have gotten them killed, but they didn't care, They were like, we're already starving.
Yeah.
They would have wished that the war was over and
Mhm.
that they would be saved. But they, it's just this sort of disregard for, convention in the end. You feel like, okay, if this is the way it's going to be, then, let's just do what we can to make ourselves okay right now in the moment. So there was that kind of, at the end, those kinds of choices, right? And then the children were a big surprise. They were around an Italian family also. And through, it's called The Haiku and the Plum Tree is the name of the movie that was done about the family. And I could give you more information about that. That's like a whole other tangent. But anyway, there were children there that were like 4 and 5 and 6 and all that. And so, yeah, they were gleaning, they were escaping and taking risks, and, because there was just no food. So I think that was the thing that was not, I mean, I wouldn't, not going down this journey, I didn't realize that was, the risk that they were taking, the level of risk they were taking.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just so much to what happened right here in America and over in Indonesia and in Japan and with the prisoners that, there's so many stories we'll never know. As I say in my book, there's, one sentence in a footnote can be a whole story, right, of this war. So I think it's really important to keep it alive and tell it. The surrender
Yes.
was yesterday. And if it wasn't for that surrender, I think my family would have died, because MacArthur made one of the rules of the surrender that all POWs were present at the surrender in Tokyo Bay. So they were instantly taken from being prisoners down to the beach in Hamamatsu, where the U.S. Marines rescued them. And when the U.S. Marines came on the beach, all their guns were drawn because they were ready for enemy encounter. But what they saw were just emaciated people that were barely alive. So they had put their guns down and put them in the transport. And then, they were all taken to Tokyo Bay. My family personally did not. They made it a little bit late for the surrender, but then they were taken to a hospital ship. And then they were taken to Manila to be in a hospital for a month to recuperate before they were evacuated as refugees to Australia, where they didn't speak English, and because they couldn't go back to Indonesia.
Hmm.
So they had to start their lives again as refugees. And so I really have a heart for refugees and their experience.
Hmm. Well, we have gleaned so much from you, Laura. This has been amazing, wonderful, and suspenseful, everything historical, so much courage. And I found it really, really fascinating. So, readers and listeners, you're going to want to get a hold of Laura's book, and it's going to be in the description below. But is there a final word you'd like to say to the audience? I like to ask my guests, like, what is your big dream? What would you really like to? What is your legacy? What would you like to leave?
I think I want to just say one thing, that one of the most special things about this is that the books were told in letters, and the title is actually in my dad's script. So he never dies, he's always with us. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's my big dream, is that, I've been able to help people tell their stories so that their families know and can pass it down from one generation to another. So my big dream is that through this book, people will be able to have a stronger faith in God or the universe or what they believe in, that is it with them no matter what, and that there's a greater peace and understanding in the world after reading this book
Mm,
about the complexities of our society and how forgiveness really is the way.
yes. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura. It's just been a pleasure to have you with us today. And it's been really, I read a little bit about it, but I didn't realize the depth that you're going to cover. And there's a lot to it. I'm sure people, and I was just thinking when we were talking about places, I think libraries would have great audiences.
That would be
Some of
great.
them like to do it on Zoom, and they do it on, they have all different types of.
Yeah, it's true. Well, thank you so much for having me, Lori. It was just my honor to be here and so wonderful to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's my honor too. And so I wish you well, and thank you so much. Domo arigato gozaimasu.
Domo arigato.
And so that's a wrap today. Thank you for listening with us, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share about the Samurai Way podcast. And that's a wrap for today's episode, The Samurai Way. I hope you found a little inspiration, a new perspective, or just something to reflect upon as you go about your day. Now remember, the samurai spirit isn't just about history. It's about how you show up, face challenges, and live with purpose. Whether it's Ikigai guiding your path, or a little extra Ganbaru pushing you forward, keep walking strong. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share, or leave a review. It really helps. And if you've got some thoughts, questions, or you just want to connect, just contact me. So until next time, stay focused, stay determined, and keep living with purpose. Mata ne.